Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and our latest foray into your listener questions. On this episode, we're debating the value of US talent heading to Europe to develop. We're asking if old MLS sides could beat current USL ones. And we've got the big one. Which animal would be best at five-a-side soccer? My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today to answer those questions and much more, it's Taylor Rockwell. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan. I did not spend the most amount of time researching that last question, but I did spend a lot of time thinking about it and consulting with my toddler daughter.
Oh, wow, you had a consultant you brought in for this one. That's interesting. Okay, I hope they're
She had less to say. She had less to say about the explosion of advanced statistics and packing stats and the like. She had some thoughts on those, but greater thoughts on animals playing soccer. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, I'm on her wavelength on that one. That's very good to hear. Joe Larry's also here. Hello, Joe.
Hello. How are you?
I'm marvelous, Joe. You're looking. If folks are watching on YouTube, they'll see you looking resplendent in an Oakland Roots jersey today. Looking good.
I'm doing my best Graham Ruthven impression. A video of Scott McTominay scoring came up on my social media feed earlier, and I was like, I have to do a Graham. Oakland Roots shirt feels like a Graham move, and I felt good about it. This is the new, I believe, the home kit for 2025. Some Oakland athletics codedness about this jersey, which maybe is a little too soon, maybe not, but it's a great shirt. I'm here for it.
It is a great shirt indeed. Thank you very much. Graham Ruthven also here with a different kind of visceral assault on the eyes that he's got wearing on today. What is that, Graham? You've got on.
Hello, Ryan. This is a Senegal track jacket. I've whipped out the Glad Rags for listener questions, which is actually something that I consider per episode what I can get away with wearing. I got a very nice Mexico shirt last week and felt like I didn't have the freedom to wear it this week, given what happened with the USMNT and Mexico winning the Nations League. So I'm wearing the Senegal track jacket today.
Very good. And Graham Ruthven, of course, famously podcasts Donald Duck style. Keep that camera at eye level, please.
That's
Graham
right.
Ruthven. Thank you very much indeed. Lots to get to in the mailbag. Before we get there, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show is the best way to support this here endeavour. Bonus listener questions coming to the bonus feed. We've got bonus video content and access to our Discord server where you can submit listener questions. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. Before we get there, hey, Joe.
Hey, Ryan.
We're Atlanta United famous now, aren't we? Right?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I think it was Kurt in the Discord had linked that yesterday, and then I tossed it into our Slack just to make sure you guys saw it. Atlanta United do a really good video series that is kind of like their self-produced docu-series throughout the year, and they put it up on their site and on YouTube. And I clicked on this, and it's like a jump scare of the four of us in our faces talking about Atlanta United in our season preview, just like, a second or whatever of that. But we opened the video. I thought that was pretty cool. Shout out to Atlanta United.
That was enough for most people. A second.
Oh, very much so. Yeah,
we didn't come back, I don't think, right?
I haven't seen the whole thing yet, but if we come back, then I'll go find it.
Yeah, there you go. Well, yeah, that was a nice surprise for us, but of course, I didn't approve that. My legal team will be in touch, Atlanta United. I hope you've lawyered up. Very good indeed. Just kidding. Or am I? Not sure. Anyway, should we get to the listener questions? Let's do that. This one has come from Discord Stu, who says, how does the current USL Championship stack up to MLS just before David Beckham arrived? And would those MLS sides be noticeably better, the same, or worse on average if they were put in the current USL top division? Taylor, I've got hot takes on this question. I am of the belief that the quality of soccer has improved exponentially in the last 20 years. I believe if you watch a Premier League game from 2000 to 2005 and you watch one now, they're a different sport. They're very different indeed. Yep. Would you like my hottest take of all, Taylor? And I think you're going to hate it.
Yes.
My
Can't
hot
wait.
take. This is related to Stu's question. I think the current Man United side could beat the 99 Man United side.
Just because of advances in sports
Totally agree.
science.
Yep.
And
I totally agree with you.
Oh, Joe's with me.
Having
Someone's
never
with me.
watched that 99 Manchester United team, I totally agree.
that's maybe not as hot as you might imagine. I think it'd be close, right? Like, because the
It's a
current Man
spicy
United
take.
team is so bad. But yeah, in principle, I can see where you're coming from.
Incredible, by the way, that we've managed to turn an MLS USL Championship question into a Manchester United discussion within 30 seconds.
Wild stuff.
My Manchester United nostalgia will not permit me to answer that idea.
Fair.
One way or
Very
the other. Mm-hmm.
I thought you were
However-
going to say the Phoenix Rising, current day Phoenix Rising would beat the 1999 Manchester United team.
I cannot abide this any
that's
longer. We've got plenty more Man United slander in the Tioli tomorrow. For now, I'll focus on the USL question. Obviously, it's tricky to say, but largely I agree with Ryan that I think the way the game has advanced, and I think that there are drawbacks to that. I think it's in certain ways a less entertaining game, a less chaotic game, but I think there is so much more research and analytics and data put into the sport at present that there is just so many different ways to play. I went back and watched the 2006 MLS Cup final because that's before Beckham arrives, culminating in Houston beating the Revs on penalties. And number one, I was struck by no one playing out of the back. It is all long kicks to midfield or just past, where you then have contested headers. You're trying to pick up that loose ball and see what happens. It is so much direct play. It is so much sort of just kick it long and hope somebody runs onto it. Most of the passes through the middle are deflected or blocked or sort of turned over and then turned over again. It's a very chaotic game, with the caveat that championship games, finals tend to be that way. But I also think, given how small the league was at that time, I forgot that there were only 12 teams in that season. I do think you are not getting as much quality and as much quality in play. And so I think USL Championship teams would largely do okay against those MLS teams. I think there are certain outliers, certain sort of exceptionally talented teams that I still don't want to go back and watch for nostalgia reasons to find out they're not as good as I remember them to be. But with certain exceptions, I think USL Championship does just fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely been a progression in play, right? But just because they're USL teams, and Joe, I'll bow to your knowledge in particular here as a USL fan, just because they are playing a different way doesn't necessarily mean that they're playing it well, right? And I just look at the talent level of, I mean, I'm probably not that well placed to answer this question, because not only did I not watch a huge amount of USL today, I certainly didn't watch any MLS pre-Beckham. That was kind of the moment that I came online with the league. But just going on surface levels, I'm llooking through the 2007 MLS Cup final, which is the year that Beckham joins. It's Houston versus the New England Revolution, I think 2 in a row, 2006 to 2007. You've got a whole bunch of US internationals. Michael Parkhurst, Steve Ralston, Pat Noonan, Taylor Twellman, Brad Davis, Wando, Stuart Holden on the bench for Houston. You've got Dwayne De Rosario also playing for the Dynamo. And if I compare that to, this is obviously very surface level, right? But if I compare that to the USL Championship final from last year, the brilliantly named Colorado Springs Switchbacks, which is definitely one word too many in that name, and Rhode Island, the players in that game obviously don't have the same standing. I'm just looking through the rest of the league from 2007 MLS, that is. The top scorers chart: Juan Pablo Angel, Eddie Johnson, Landon Donovan, Josie Altidore, Marisa Adu won Rookie of the Year that year. Brad Guzan wins the Golden Glove that year before he goes to the Premier League. So there is a point where like progression of the sport in general runs into the talent level, right? And I kind of wonder if MLS would still have the edge.
Well, and it's interesting, Graham, that you look at 2007, kind of just that last half season after Beckham gets there. I think that's the perfect window for this. I was looking at 2006. Taylor, I mean, we're all kind of in the same ballpark on this. I went back through and found a story from the Washington Post that had the salary data for 2006. That's what I was looking at, just before Beckham. And I went through and Google Sheets it all up and added all the numbers together. And on average, MLS teams, so 12 teams, like Taylor was saying earlier, spent $2.2 million on wages. $2.2 million. John Morrissey, who does good stuff for us over at Backfield, had reported recently that the average USL Championship wage bill is between $3 and $4 million. Maybe there's a couple outliers on the low end. But really, USL Championship teams today are spending almost exactly the same after you account for the difference in buying power from 2006 dollars to today's dollars. Shout out to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. It's almost identical, the amount of money that MLS teams were spending then on their rosters and the amount of money that the average USL Championship team today is spending on their roster. So that gets me to, I think, a rough conclusion that USL teams probably aren't getting played off the park here, right? If we think about, okay, who's going to finish inside the top 10 of this new combined 2025 USL Championship MLS from 2006 league, where there's, I guess, 36 teams in the league, 24 from the championship and 12 from MLS. Who's going to finish inside the top 10? You might get a couple of USL teams in there. The area where I sway back towards MLS is exactly what Graham said. You think about the advantage that MLS had, even at that time, in attracting top-end talents. I mean, you mentioned a bunch of those names, Graham. I don't know if Kobe Jones came up on that list, maybe not. Eddie Pope, Tony Sane. Like, there are legit legit players that could have been playing at higher levels, and USL still just doesn't quite have those guys that are on, 300,000 plus a year contracts on every team. And not every team in MLS had that back in the day either. I was talking with Doyle about this question, asking his perspective, because I wasn't watching MLS in 06 either. And he sort of referred to that era as the dark age of Major League Soccer, right? Where you have the boom after the league launches, and there's lots of fun players in the league, and then it just is a lot of muck in that early to mid 2000s. So again, I think USL teams have chances in some of these games, but I do think, Graham, you're spot on. The top end talent is probably the differentiator here. And if I got to pick a top 10 from this new 36 team league, I'm thinking probably like 7 or 8 of them are coming from Major League Soccer, and you get a couple from the championship.
I think I am more generous towards USL than either of you, for a couple of reasons. First of all, I understand where you all are pulling from when you talk about the top end talent. Not every team had that top end talent.
No, it's true.
Chivas USA is participating at this time.
We don't talk about them.
6 draws in 32 games.
Gold rule, Taylor. We don't talk about that team.
Exactly.
Taylor. Chivas
Yeah.
USA spent more money on salary in 2006 than any other team in Major League Soccer, which blew my mind looking back on it. They spent $3-point-something million, and there were a couple teams in the high 1-point-somethings that year.
Yeah.
Unreal.
And so I think there are certain teams that would be fine to okay because they have the talent, and I think could adjust over time as well. Some of those early DC United teams, I think the 98 team is the one that sort of looms large in my head, but LA Galaxy teams of that time period are pretty exceptionally strong as well. I do think you then get into some of the dark ages, as Joe said, and I think for me, again, there's expenditure, there's top-end talent. A lot of it just comes down to the evolution of the game. And I think back to those first Dutch teams in the 70s that would employ pressing. And if you haven't seen those, go watch the YouTube compilations of Dutch pressing in the 70s. That was next level. How can anyone handle this? And it looks like U6 kids swarming a ball. It's the whole team just running at someone, and no one knows how to do that, or no one knows how to deal with it because no one's handled a press before, so they're just kicking it at them or turning it over. And I think MLS teams of that era playing against pressing, hard-running USL teams are going to be sort of overwhelmed by, wait, these guys are winning the ball back and then not just kicking it back to us? How does this work? We don't understand. And in that 2006 MLS Cup final, I think the commentators were Bruce Arena and Eric Winalda. I'll pause for that one for a moment. And
Wait, sorry. The commentators were Bruce Arena and Eric Winalda.
The color commentators. I forget who was the lead commentator.
I was this is must-see TV. I got to go back and watch this.
It's something because I think Houston has 2. I'm gonna say quote unquote crosses in the first 10 minutes that are both hit from 40 yards out that go straight to the goalkeeper, who brings them both down. And then I think the commentator about 5 minutes in says to Bruce Arena, what do you see so far? He's like, Houston just already creating dangerous opportunities. And they hoofed it long to no one in the box. And it was just we were calling that a dangerous opportunity, huh? All right, okay, the bar was kind of low is what I'm kind of figuring out from this game. Again, small sample size of that game and my memory. But I think it would be, I wish there were a way to make this happen. I'm sure some sort of person with an advanced degree in Football Manager could find a way, but until that exists, I'll just say I lean USL.
I'm laughing because I think we're about to get a fifth guest. Was that the Roomba trying to get into your recording room, right?
I had to get up because my robot vacuum kept trying to open the door. I'm sorry.
The future.
I've locked it.
It just knows where the filth is in the house. That's all.
It can't hurt us now. Yeah, and it does.
Almost.
You're right.
Just going back to USL versus MLS, I think we have to get the Des Moines Menace to make this happen in however you pronounce that. I've probably pronounced that incorrectly. The US Open Cup team that has been playing Sasha Klishton, and
you nailed it.
Let's make it happen. Let's get some of these 2006, 2007 MLS guys to play a USL team in the US Open Cup.
They had already folded by then, but the Des Moines Menace need to play the Tampa Bay Mutiny. That feels like a good pairing of names and branding.
Agreed.
Let's make it happen.
This discussion reminds me, I don't know if Graham remembers, there was a cult soccer show called Fantasy Football League that used to air in the UK back in the day. And they had a segment they play every week that was just called Old Football Was Rubbish, but not as rubbish as Andy Cole. And it was a way to make fun of Andy Cole at the time, but it highlighted how soccer from 20 years before was a completely different game to it was in the 90s. So the point being, in a period of 20 years, the game really does move on quite a bit.
I understand what you mean now, but for genuinely for 1/2 second, I was just picturing pundits in dark robes, a pentagram behind them, candles lit, and then it's just like cult figures being like, that's just not good enough. It's got to be better this weekend. like I need it to be a cult talking about football as opposed to a cult football program.
Who says it wasn't?
Fair point. All right. Yeah. That does feel like something that you would not watch.
Indeed. All right, Stu, Discord Stu, thank you very much indeed for that question. Let's take a quick pause. When we come back, we've got a big MLS economics question to tackle. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. Ian Brady has been in touch, and Joe, he doesn't have one question. He literally has 10. Literally 10, I counted them. This is a big question. You
Double
ready? Here we go.
digits. I'm ready.
Double digits on the listener questions. Here we go. Ian says, can you walk through the economics of an MLS team? It seems relevant given the USL Pro Rel announcement versus Charlotte's $350 million and San Diego's $500 million entry fee. Is game day revenue the most important factor to teams? Do they get 1/30th of the Apple money currently, or does that cover the base salary? Besides designated players' amounts above the salary limit, do teams have to contribute for player salaries, or are those paid by MLS? Do teams keep their own jersey sale money, or does MLS? How much does an academy cost? Do teams have to pay MLS at the beginning of each year, or only when they join the league? Joe, was that 10? Am I right?
It was 10. You were spot on,
Yes.
Ryan. Well done.
Very good.
You've got to do Ian's taxes as well at the end of this question.
All right, Joe.
Brutal.
You wanna dive in here?
Yeah, fair enough. Lots of questions here, and I asked around at some teams about this. I asked around to try and get some answers to the ones that I didn't know. Perspectives may vary on some of these club-specific questions, but there is a good bit of uniformity across the board. I'm going to try to go through as many of these as I can. Question 1, can you walk through the economics of an MLS team? Yes. Question 2, is game day revenue the most important to teams? Yes. Game day revenue, so think about tickets and parking. Shout out Ryan Bailey at now BMO Stadium. Tickets and parking, and then also toss in local sponsorships, which is a little bit outside of game day. But those are roughly similar in size for a lot of MLS teams in terms of the revenue that they generate. And they are the key pieces of teams generating revenue. After that, there is a big drop-off from game day and local sponsorships to the next category, which is still not TV money. It is outside events, being able to host concerts or host friendlies in your stadium. Those things generate money. You can sell that. You can sell that as a real thing that has value to somebody who wants to do something in your stadium. The next question, do they get 1/30th of the Apple money? In theory, yes, but teams are not getting 1/30th of $250 million, right? Coming in each year, $2.5 billion over 10 years. That's the Apple deal that Apple and MLS agreed to coming to Major League Soccer. I was basically told that whatever Apple TV revenue is there is largely, maybe not entirely, but is largely getting netted out by spending on production, right? Because MLS spends a lot of money on production. You got to pay talent. You got to rent studio space. I mean, there's a lot going on there, and they've spent a lot of money on that stuff. They're trying to cut back some expenses, which we talked about a little bit pre-show. But the revenue on the TV side is not significant to what's happening here. I've talked for a long time. Does anybody else want to go on any of those things? Because there's still a lot more questions left to go.
Keep going.
Okay, all right. I'm just going to keep cooking then. All right.
We support you.
The next question from Ian. Thanks. I feel supported. Can we do like a human pyramid thing after this? I feel like that'd be fun. I want to be on top, obviously. Does that cover the base salary? I think Ian's asking about the Apple money. Certainly not, because there's not a lot of money that's coming in from that stuff. Beside designated player amounts above the salary limit, do teams have to contribute for player salaries? First of all, don't think of DPs as being different from players here. Like they're all in the, somebody's got to pay people, right? So team owners are on the hook for paying those people, but the way that payment is structured is a little bit different than maybe you would expect because MLS is a single entity league. All players, and again, that includes DPs, are under contract with Major League Soccer, right? So you sign your contract with the league, and they are paid mechanically by the league. Like you get your check, that's coming from Major League Soccer. But each team pays MLS for those player costs. So if the Seattle Sounders are on the hook for $22 million for their wage budget, and they owe Jordan Morris 2 point something, and they owe Albert Rusnak 1.9, and they owe Obed Vargas $400,000, they're going to pay the $22 million that they owe across the entire wage bill, DPs and homegrowns, everybody alike. They're going to write a check to MLS, and then MLS is going to write a check to the players. So that's how that structure works. And I think that answers, or are those paid for by Major League Soccer? Yes, but also no. Ultimately, no. Do teams keep their own jersey sale money, or does MLS? Yes and yes, I suppose. On merchandise sales, teams get a cut, but you got Fanatics, you got the vendor, you got Major League Soccer. Everybody's taking their little piece of the pie. And I think the
Graham's got
last
cut.
question, I can actually answer here. I think this is 9 of the 10. How much does running an academy cost? A lot of money. And this is a mileage may vary situation, but think about full-time staff covering expenses. These are free academies. You're covering, some of these folks are covering living for these players as well. It can be a huge expense. And Don Garber said, at I think the last State of the League address he did, that MLS teams are spending over $100 million on their academies and second teams each year. That's a lot of money. Looking just at the academy stuff, I've heard that some MLS teams are closer to maybe that $2-3 million range. You could probably do it for a little bit less than that. Some, though, like Philadelphia, are bordering on 8 figures in the amount of money that they spend. And as a reminder that we kind of bag on the Union for not spending on high-level senior players, they are still spending legit money on their structure. I don't know about the registration fee or like the yearly payment thing that teams have to do. I suspect they do not have to do that, but I did not get an answer on that. I'm done. Whew. 9 out of 10 is not bad, fellas.
Good job, Joe. Well done. I do know from experience at Charlotte FC that the academy was pretty much the biggest startup cost for the club as well.
Sure.
Because as you mentioned, there's infrastructure, there's paying all the staff, it's running pretty regularly, it's travel. There's a lot involved in it. So very good job. Whew. Anyone else? Taylor?
I think, Joe specifically, correct me if I'm wrong in this one, but I think the thing that always helps me to understand the way MLS operates is to remember that you have your so David Tepper, we say owns Charlotte. He is the owner of Charlotte, but in actuality, he buys into the league and owns the percentage of ownership that would make up Charlotte essentially.
Right.
So when you're paying that expansion fee, the other owners are essentially being all right, we're letting you get your cut of whatever revenue we're making from the league, from TV deals, from matchday revenue, whatever, and to kind of make up for us getting a slightly smaller share of the pie, you are paying us to let you in to then make money. But so you're not buying your franchise. You are running your franchise, but you kind of technically don't own that. You own the percentage of ownership that they would make up within the league, or percentage of whatever they would make up within the league. And so in that way, it is then the league that kind of controls everything, even if you have individual control over your franchise.
I think that's spot on, Taylor, just with the caveat of there is a distinction here between the revenue that's coming into the league and Charlotte selling tickets, right? So you do have the ability to generate your own revenue that is not split up amongst the other clubs, as far as I'm aware, by going out and hosting events at your stadium and selling tickets and sponsorships and all that stuff. But yes, you're absolutely right when it comes to the national stuff of, if Charlotte want to buy into Major League Soccer, the other teams are ceding a small piece of the pie that they have previous stakes in exchange for Charlotte paying them $350 million. I think at the moment, and the reason why MLS likes expansion so much is that the league is they're not really making money. The teams will get, at this point, 1/30th of whatever overflow there is coming in from the league. That just doesn't really exist at the moment. So you're not really tapping into a reliable national revenue stream from Major League Soccer. You're pretty happy to collect expansion fees because you're not generating that kind of revenue at a national level. You are trying to do really good work at the local level and hoping that someday your league is popular enough to generate larger TV revenue and actually start to get a bit more of a payout on that front.
Yeah, the starkest thing for me in this research, and it wasn't something that I was unaware of. I remember when MLS struck the Apple TV deal, and we spoke about this on a Big Thing episode, but clubs are not making a huge amount of money out of that deal. Obviously, the top figure is $2.5 billion over 10 years, and there's two ways to read that, right? Because I think globally that deal still stacks up reasonably well against other leagues. But the other way to read that is that MLS does exceptionally well with game day revenue, with match day revenue. I think I read a SportCal article that said MLS is now ranked 5th in the world for match day revenue. So while TV is still sort of the final frontier for this league in terms of making real money from it, and that's the thing that makes the Premier League the greatest league in the world, is the money that they get through TV deals. There's been a lot of success on the match day front.
That just shows me that tickets are really expensive, Graham, if I'm honest. That statistic.
And there's a lot of suites at Bank of America Stadium for Daddy Tepper to sell.
This is true.
Thank you for calling him by his true name, Graham, by the way. I want
his government name.
Acknowledge that. Yeah.
We appreciate that. Yeah, that's right. I think, Joe, also when you've all mentioned that MLS teams don't necessarily make a lot of money, the other part of it is that the valuations are constantly going up, right? So the owners and the actual value of the team, as is perceived, are going up considerably. And some of those MLS teams are much bigger than some in value than some major European teams as well at this point.
Yeah.
So there's a perspective value that comes in as well.
And I don't know what Greg Kerfoot spent. I don't remember what he spent to buy the Vancouver Whitecaps back in the day. He is trying to sell the Vancouver Whitecaps, and he is going to make a lot of money, right? He is going to make a lot of money exiting. It is about enterprise value for so many of these owners, and it's also about, only so many people on the planet can say that they own a sports team, and rich people like to do cool stuff. I mean, everybody likes to do cool stuff, just the cool stuff you get to do when you have billions of dollars is a bit different, I suppose.
I don't like to do cool stuff. Don't speak for me.
No, sorry, my bad. I interpreted you having a Roomba as a telltale sign of you liking to do cool stuff, Ryan. So yeah, it is. These owners are playing the long game, and many of them are trying to minimize costs and just maintain enterprise value and see that grow over time, which is why we haven't seen any massive, sweeping, obvious changes to what MLS does on the spending front. Instead, it has happened much more gradually, and that is because there are lots of owners who are just content to see their assets appreciate.
It's not just a Roomba, Joe. It's a sentient Roomba. It's actually bringing you a cup of coffee, Ryan. And you closed the door on it.
Game changed.
It's too noisy, Graham. It's too noisy. If it brought me a silent cup of coffee, I would have let it come in. It did not, unfortunately. Taylor, any more on this question, or should we jump forward?
You say you like to do cool rich people things. You guys outlawed human hunting on the Bailey estate, correct? I can't remember if that was a thing that you all still do once a year, or
Officially, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wink.
Wink. Okay, cool.
But, first weekend in April, Taylor. Come down. Ian Brady, thank you very much indeed for your question. Ed Horatius has been in touch. What's the history of interpretive statistics such as XG and things like that? Years ago, TSS introduced us to the aforementioned packing stats, a German stat that tracks how many defenders are taken out of a play by a pass. Did a company begin then, or was it a coach or a team? And what is the next frontier for soccer statistics?
It was Joe Lowry, right? We can all agree.
Yeah.
It was Joe who did it all.
You're to blame.
Ha-ha!
Okay.
Burley, what's that guy's name? Craig Burnley?
Craig Burley?
Yeah, he can take out his rage on me, I suppose.
He probably will. I want to start off by asking a question myself. Am I wrong in saying, there are other influences throughout history? There are, statisticians from the 1950s. Is it Billy Beane and Moneyball that really starts this? Not that he starts it himself, but that spreads the popularity of advanced statistics in sports?
I think certainly that helped spread the I think, yes, ultimately that
gospel
helped
of
do
Bill
what
James,
you described.
Yeah.
I don't know and wasn't really aware of when that was all happening, frankly, so I don't know what the bleed was into soccer, I suppose.
So I think, to my understanding, basically you get advanced statistics in baseball and other sports in the late 90s into the early 2000s, and that's when it starts to have some appeal to certain individual clubs. I think I read Liverpool and Arsenal were some of the early adopters to using sports science and data tracking to improve player performance, essentially. But it's around, I think, 2010 to 2014 is when Opta becomes a major player. That's when XG becomes more in the common parlance, I think. And then from 2014 to 2018, you get the explosion of sites that offer new advanced ways to analyze and interpret data like StatsBomb. And that's when I think clubs, specifically Man City, Bayern Munich, and Liverpool, all have analytics departments and much more involvement and usage of data. But I think it is sort of an organic growth that does seem to have started in baseball and then has spread elsewhere. And similar to other sports, took a good bit of time for people to get on board and see value in, as opposed to just seeing it as nerds trying to control sports.
Yeah, and it wasn't just happening in baseball, though. It also was happening in soccer. I think maybe a lot of folks out there, some folks out there will have heard of Charles Reap a little bit, who was kind of the first.
That was the aforementioned 1950s statistician I was alluding to. Yeah.
So Charles Reap back in the 60s and back in the 20th century was collecting numbers of shots and length of passing moves, and he was really more interested in passing than he was in shooting for hundreds of games in the 60s. And even though some of the conclusions it seemed like he got were wrong, he did help provide some of these foundational moments and movements for analytics, and thinking about expected goals in particular, because I think that has been the thing that has captured the most attention and has also served as something of a foundational statistic in more of the modern age for soccer. I've seen articles that cite that the term expected goals was coined in 1993. Then Reap comes in with another paper in the late 90s that moves the ball a little bit further down the field. And this whole thing is advanced in the early 2000s, really inside of its own soccer sphere. Yes, it's bleed in from other sports, but soccer is just so much harder to quantify because it is free flowing. It doesn't have individual events in the same way or in the same quantity that baseball does. It does have events, but they're not structured the same way. So you get into the 2000s, it's becoming a bit more popular, and then it makes Match of the Day in 2017, And that's sort of the moment that is generally cited as XG becoming mainstream. It had been a thing in hockey too, as well. I do want to note that, and there's some statistical similarities. As far as where these things come from, you mentioned Opta becoming a thing and StatsBomb Taylor, that's spot on. Another pattern that emerges here is in the soccer stat space is that smart people do good work in the public space. And that's really where XG primarily comes from, is bloggers, right? And John Mueller and Seattle Football have a good, really in the weeds podcast about this called Postscript. And they talk about sort of the history of these things happening. This comes from bloggers and people just kind of reasoning it out in the public space. And those smart people do really good work, such good work that teams notice and hire them, which was the case with Arsenal, certainly, Liverpool probably as well. They hire those people, and then soccer stats work stalls because the teams want to keep all the good stuff to themselves, right? And that's kind of where we are now with tracking data. And that is the next frontier, I think, generally regarded in this space as the next frontier, is moving away from event data, which XG is an event data statistic, where it's based off of a moment in time in a soccer game, where the shot's taken, how it's taken, what's the context around the shot, to tracking data, which is much more free-flowing and can provide insights into where space is and how teams exploit space, and really into the things that happen when players aren't on the ball, which is most of the game. A player's barely on the ball in a 90-minute game. The vast majority of what they do is off the ball. And figuring out how to harness information into what happens in that massive piece of the pie during a soccer game is the next frontier. But the big clubs are already doing some of this stuff. We're just not getting it trickling down to us in the public space because they want to keep it secret. That's kind of where we are right now in the soccer stat space.
Joe, how is tracking data quantified? Like, how would you go about discussing that?
So they, how would I discuss it, or how is it collected? I suppose.
How is it? How like XG?
What are
I
your
think,
data points?
Exactly. Like XG is
I
the
see.
thing that we can understand. Is like expected goals. He should have scored. Is not really what it is, but like you can get your head around that. What you are now describing sounds a bit more like where he should have occupied space, and had he have occupied space, it feels conditional theoretical, and I'm assuming it is not. It's just my Luddite brain not wanting to adapt.
I haven't thought about this a ton, but I think you could try to quantify the amount of space that teams leave between their lines in a more detailed kind of way. You could try to quantify the off-ball positioning of players. And I mean, you can map all this stuff out on the field. And if you can map it, you can quantify it in some more specific way. You can figure out which players are making more off-ball runs, right? That's a pretty simple thing. Like what kind of runs players are making. That data exists. It just doesn't filter out to us in the public space. How players move off the ball, I think, is going to be a real key part of this. And you can quantify that with the number of events that they're doing, or the types of moves that they're making off the ball, the angle at which they move them, how defensive teams control space. I think it's almost like this limitless opportunity to go and gain real actionable insights to what's happening. It does seem a bit murky at the moment, and that's because I don't have a great understanding of it, so I'm not doing a great job of explaining it. But I also do want to note, XG maybe seems more clear to us now. It didn't always feel that way, I think, to people talking about sports. So it just takes a little bit of time for this stuff to get used to.
I think early on in one of your first appearances on Total Soccer Show was me peppering you with questions about XG and how it works and what it means, and then I think later on there was the like expected goals minus like actual goals and getting into what all of that means in data interpretation. So I think looking back on this, I'm like, oh, I've known this for forever. And like, no, I understood it more in like 2019, 2020 when Joe explained it to me.
Yeah. But it's a process, right? Where it's not only about how you collect this data, but then how you interpret it, right? That's the skill. That's what the people at these clubs are employed to do. This isn't necessarily to do with XG. But there was a good Blue Sky thread a few weeks ago by a former Opta employee, which I found really interesting. He was saying basically in the late 90s they were scaling up, and it was linked to fantasy football and the explosion of fantasy football at that time, and the fact that data needed to be collected. And as unbelievable as this may sound now, there was a time like in the Premier League they didn't collect data beyond goals. Like they didn't even collect assists. So he was basically saying that they would sit down in these meetings, they would decide what they wanted to collect, and then when they decided what they were going to collect, they would go back through hundreds and thousands of hours of tape from previous seasons to then build up the database. So this one guy was saying he kept on getting asked by fans and by general people if Thierry Henry had broken the Premier League record for the most assists. Opta didn't know. They didn't have that data at that time in the late 90s. So it was this guy's job to go back and watch every game from the Premier League for like 5 seasons before then to work out if Thierry Henry had broken the assist record, which I can't decide, is that Joe's dream or your hell with the assists?
More the second, I think. You know, assist records, super meaningful and things that we should take very seriously.
We've come a long way since then, though.
Yeah.
We have indeed. That sounds like a job that AI would do these days, I would suspect. We should probably, lest we forget that one of the biggest drivers for these kind of statistics as well is sports betting. And, operators who are trying to set their prices for sports betting, and it's all data they use to determine that. So, of course, it is commercial reasons, essentially, that have inspired a lot of this stuff. Graham, a final question here on the next frontier for soccer stats. Is it going to be stuff that's sort of AI based? Is it going to be replacing coach kind of stuff? What do we think?
Is your Roomba doing that? That's why it wanted in the room to be a coach. I
wasn't smart enough to stay out when I'm recording, was it?
No, AI still got some way to go. I can do Studio Ghibli AI images, which have exploded across social media this morning, but can it coach a team? Not yet. I don't have a great answer to that. I would suspect kind of more tracking and interpretation of tracking statistics would be where I would look to. Joe, I don't know if you've got a better idea of what the final frontier is.
I don't have a great read on the AI angle that Ryan's talking about. I certainly think there have been real advancements made in tracking data, and that's becoming much more of a thing that clubs are using, especially at higher levels. I think that is the stuff that's going to eventually trickle down into the public sphere next. And when that happens, that is going to create more innovation. I mean, that's just how it works, right? Garth Lagerwey's talked about this before with like data analysts across all sports and talking about how everybody thinks they can be the GM better than the actual GM, right? Everybody thinks they can run a team better. And so they talk about it and they put their theories and their thoughts out into the public space. And sure, most of that stuff's not going to be very helpful, right? Because my brain doesn't, despite the fact that I think I understand some of all this, my brain doesn't work like a sporting director's or a data analyst's. I don't have that base of knowledge. So maybe my thoughts are not going to be super actionable for teams to go and look at and want to take on. But some people out there are going to be great at it, and they're going to move the ball down the field in the public space just by sheer volume of people that are interested in this stuff. Somebody's going to break through on something, and that is going to help us move the ball a little bit further down the field. And again, a lot of this is already happening, just it's behind closed doors.
Good stuff. All right. Thank you very much, Ed Horatius, for your question. We take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking about Gio Reyna. And, of course, the big one, the Animal Five-a-side question. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to our listener questions. Clay Dubs has been in touch. Why has Gio Reyna consistently struggled to get playing time with different clubs and coaches, even when he's healthy?
Despite
Taylor,
Joe.
Yeah, it feels so good to have retired from the Gio Reyna conversation. I can just sit back and listen. I feel free, man. It's amazing.
Are you back in at this point, though, Joe? To answer this question?
No, I'm out. I'm a listener. I talked plenty in the last segment.
I mean, I don't believe
Diego Luna now.
I'm not buying this at all. Joe is never going to be over this. Joe is wearing a Gio Reyna full kit underneath whatever he's wearing at any given moment. So when the time comes, he can just rip it off to reveal he's been here the whole time. That is absolutely how this is going to play out. When Gio Reyna wins the Ballon d'Or after the U.S. wins the World Cup, as we all know is going to happen.
Yeah. So, Taylor, do you want to say the reason why?
There's a few things, I think. And I should clarify, no one knows for sure. Dortmund, I think, have been pretty tight-lipped about, behind-the-scenes incidents and frustrations. Obviously, there's been some of the personal stuff when it comes to U.S. soccer. And I do think his family influences do play a part in where some things have gone wrong for him. By all accounts, it was Claudio Reyna and Gio aggressively pushing for the move to Nottingham Forest, that loan to Nottingham Forest, whereas Dortmund and I believe Gio's own agent said this is probably not a good move for him. They have people that already play that position. They're in a relegation battle. He's probably not going to get a ton of time, but they went through anyway. And so I think there is some personal stuff there. But I also think if you look at the injury timeline, and I know the question asked about even when he's healthy, but I think it's worth understanding the injury history to then look at when he is healthy, because essentially he has missed at least 19 games in 3 of the last 4 seasons. And his basically best season is 2020-2021. He plays 32 matches, 23 starts, 1,900 plus minutes, 4 goals and 5 assists. And I think if he stays healthy, he is going to be in the plans for Lucien Favre and then Edin Terzic. And he is, basically. Even though there's a managerial change, he's started by Favre. When Favre is sacked, in comes Terzic, and Terzic plays him. And I think he's poised for a breakout season. But then he gets injured. Marco Rosa comes in. Marco Rosa is sacked. Edin Terzic comes back. And I think a lot of his injuries have been at points when there are new managers coming in, and they either don't have him in there from the jump, or he's returning from injury. They can't really focus on him because they're trying to kind of get things stabilized, get things running smoothly. And then by the time they do, they've got an established 11, they've got an established 18, and maybe Reyna hasn't been in it, and now he has to earn his spot all over again, combined with the fact that you've had Julian Brandt there, you've had Marco Reus there before that. So players operating centrally where Reyna wants to play, by all accounts, that's what he prefers. That's what he sees himself as. And Terzic talked about how he wants to be a number 10. That's what Gio Reyna has said is his position. However, we have others ahead of him. And so I think it's been a combination of injuries with poor timing in terms of managers being sacked, new managers coming in, combined with other players ahead of him, combined with maybe attitude issues, off-field issues, all rolled together.
I think that is the answer, Taylor. I think all of those factors are the reason. I mean, you can't really ignore the attitude stuff, and Poch making that comment straight off the bat when he calls him up for the first time, I think, is quite telling. I find it difficult to speculate about that stuff because we don't truly know. But it does, joining the dots, it feels like there's some sort of issue there going, Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, Graham, I appreciate that you don't want to speculate. I will speculate a little bit to say that my assumption has long been that Gio Reyna is just, though I think he's very stoic and very unemotional in most of the interviews I have ever seen, I get the impression that he is an emotional figure, especially on the pitch. We've seen that time and time again, that you can see his frustration, you can see his consternation when things don't go the way he thinks they should have, when a pass doesn't come off. And my assumption is that that extends to the way he deals with not starting, not being called up for games, not being included in squads. And I think that's where some of the stuff happens with Berhalter, is there is a very strong reaction to being told he is not going to be a starter. He is going to have, quote unquote, very limited opportunities or whatever it is. And I think that has extended to his club career as well, that when he feels he's ready to go and he doesn't get looks, my assumption is that he doesn't really hide that frustration. And I don't think coaches love having somebody sitting on the bench who's kind of grumbling about how they should be playing.
Yeah, there's something about his character or work ethic or attitude or something that managers just don't like, right? I'm comfortable saying that. I just, obviously when you're not in the training ground, you're not in the locker room, you can't really pinpoint exactly what those things are. I kind of wonder if there's also a positional thing where not many European teams play with, Taylor, you say he wants to play, manager said he wants to play as a number 10. Well, Dortmund do kind of play with that position. Not many other teams have a true number 10. And if you plot him elsewhere on the pitch, I don't know if he's explosive enough to be a wide player. I have doubts about putting him in a midfield unit due to his, how do you describe it, defensive fibre, maybe not being quite up to the standard of like you put him in a double pivot or something like that. So I think there might be something there as well. Having said that, good players find a way into the team. Phil Foden was the best player in the Premier League last year, one player of the year, and I would say that he's a number 10 by trade, and yet he still managed to find a way to make it work for Man City. So it's a confusing one. The talent is quite clearly there, but it feels like he's really at a crossroads in his career. He's going to get a move this summer, surely. I mean, that's definitely been the rumblings, is that this is the end of his time at Dortmund. So very, very interested to see where he goes from this point, because his career decisions, as you said, Taylor, have not been good. That decision to go to Nottingham Forest was a bad move. I think we all said it right from the start. They had Morgan Gibbs-White in that position. They didn't really play to his strengths. And Real Sociedad wanted him at the same time. That would have been a much better move, where they are a team that wants to have the ball. He would have got the reps. I think you can have him and Taki Kubo in the same team with the way that they play. That was the move at that point. So he needs to make a better decision this summer.
This discussion's actually got me thinking about the previous question about the next frontier for soccer stats. And I mean this sincerely. What if the next statistical sort of thing is, I want to say, expected attitude or expected confidence of a player? They can measure the sentiment of players. Well, I don't know how, because it doesn't exist yet. But what if you could measure, like going into the USMNT window, for example, and players not really being up for it? I wonder if there's a way they could get the sentiment somehow before
turn
a
up
game.
Late. Your expected lateness.
But you know what I mean? Even during a game, if you could say they're not at full capacity in terms of effort or concentration, I wonder if that is the actual next statistic that we will look at. Could happen, right?
XMR, expected mind reading, I think, maybe.
I mean, obviously you can
Ryan,
track.
I think you've just combined data analytics with witchcraft. I'm pretty sure.
Or Neuralink getting involved in...
I mean, now I'm wondering. Now Elon Musk's ears just perked up out of nowhere.
You're laughing at something at a technology that doesn't exist, but a lot of technologies we have now didn't exist 20 years ago. That's all I'm saying.
True.
Like Roombas.
I'm largely
Ryan,
just
remember us when
uncomfortable-
you're in the big time. That's all I'm saying.
I'm largely uncomfortable that none of you seem to be afraid of Skynet. I'm actually okay with AI becoming like an AI coach and an artificial human coach, just because I feel like so often, at least in pop culture, when we have artificial people, androids and the like, and artificial intelligence, it always ends up kind of trying to destroy humanity. So maybe on a soccer pitch, the worst case is that it's essentially Jose Mourinho. I think it would be the worst case scenario.
Huh. We'll see. All right.
But as to Gio Reyna, I think it is still worth remembering. Is still young at this point.
Yeah,
Joe, do you know how old he is? 22?
22.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Like that's still a very young player, young person who can still mature, who can still have new aspects of their game, but I think also of their emotional intelligence and I think individual growth and can sort of still learn and still become a very key player, a very successful player. I think it is just that there is the injury record combined with some of the off-field issues or perceived issues kind of rolled together with a lack of minutes for a club where he has been for a long time, and a club that tends to give opportunities to young players that ends up feeling like there's something else there's something else going wrong, and it might just be an unfortunate series of like timing misadventures essentially. But I think it all kind of leads to there's smoke, is there also fire sort of situation.
Yeah, my concern, he is still young, Taylor, that's absolutely fair. My concern is that he's missed a lot of formative years. So he breaks through as 16, 17 years old. You can see the talent. I always think with players, and this is a generalisation of course, but those years between 17, 18 and then into your early 20s is really nailing down what you are as a player and where you play and what you provide, and he's kind of missed those years. So there's a theory that, players have mileage. And so Wayne Rooney played a lot as 16, 17, 18-year-old, and so his career ended relatively early in his 30s. Maybe Reyna's going to play later in his career because he actually hasn't played much football for the last few years.
All right, we shall see. Clay, thank you very much for the question. Joe, thank you for not wading in, seeing as you've retired from this topic.
Yep.
Thank you very much indeed.
really
couple more
has.
AJ on the Discord says, should American players stop leaving for Europe unless they're promised a starting role and a pile of money? Now, this is a very interesting question, I think, Joe, because you have to. I've had some experience working with young players a little bit who have looked to make this move and have made this move as sort of young, teenage, precocious players in the US to Europe. And the presiding feeling is they want to go there. They want to play at that level. They want to play in front of big crowds, and they want to develop there. That's the sense. They'll get a better development pathway over in some maybe a second-tier European team than they would do necessarily here. I don't think that's necessarily right or wrong, but that is certainly the perception. So I think that will take a mindset change from young American players for that to be the case. I mean, obviously AJ's premise there that they shouldn't go unless they're going to be properly utilized by these teams is a valid one, but in practice, it's tricky.
Yeah, it's a great point, Ryan, and not something I really considered with all this. There is very much a cultural pull to going and even just to playing in Europe. I think you said, Ryan, like a second-tier European league. I'm thinking about Belgium or the Netherlands. Or, you can even drop down lower if you're talking about USL guys going and moving to Europe, where they're going to get stashed on a second-tier team in the Netherlands. And I think maybe that's going to take another generation of players to unwire some of those things of just the appeal to Europe as a blanket statement of, wow, European soccer is better than American soccer. I want to go there to test myself. I think it's a fair thing to think. But when you actually dig down into some of these players going and moving to situations that are not ideal, right? And some USL guys that have gone to the Netherlands and gotten stashed, like I'm talking about, that maybe is not a good idea for your career because those leagues don't have the same eyeballs on them. And as American soccer continues to improve, there are homes for players. European teams watch American soccer. If you perform well in the United States, you can go and eventually find a better situation for you. It's interesting. I think that's going to take time to rewire some of that stuff and the perception of American soccer from American players to European soccers. Now, I do think that going to higher levels in Europe can be super valuable for guys, right? If we're talking about better levels, and even the Belgiums and the Netherlands is of Europe, it's going to make them better because the competition is better at higher levels, and that's going to make more well-rounded players. We kind of talked about this some yesterday with Weston McKennie. If you can find the right situation and make the right move for your career, and that's kind of what AJ's getting at here as well, is you want to go to the right place, a place that's going to be beneficial for you. Yes, and I don't think that necessarily always looks like being promised a starting role in a pile of money, and promises don't mean a whole lot in this sport anyway, right? So I think you want to be discerning in where you're going. At the same time, and to bring the McKennie conversation back, I would enjoy it, though, if we saw some guys become central players in teams in Big Four leagues, right? And that probably means Weston McKennie starring for Sassuolo. I picked random teams, by the way. Starring for Sassuolo instead of, being a role player for Juventus. Or Tim Weah starting on the right wing for Lecce instead of being a rotation piece for Juventus. I think there would be a lot of merit in that for players. I think there'd be a lot of merit in that for the United States. But ultimately, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, right? If you're Correia Osundina, maybe you'd be benefiting from sticking around in American soccer for a little bit longer instead of just taking the first plane out of Orange County. If you are Sam Vines and you want to go test yourself in Belgium because you think that maybe at this point European teams aren't really looking at you with the Rapids because you've been around for a while and you want to go make that move, or maybe it's the only move you have and you want to go see the world, that's totally fine. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And for Sam Vines, it didn't work out. He comes back across the Atlantic, and that's okay. Not everybody's going to have a Gio Reyna-esque move to Dortmund at such a young age and actually become a key first-team figure before sort of unraveling, even still, time to get back on track. But I think it's just not a one-size-fits-all approach, and it does require a lot of discernment.
Yeah. And I think, Graham, the idea of being promised a starting role, I don't know how practical and realistic that is for any player, let alone a young developing player.
I mean, that is quite extreme, promise a starting role. I don't know if that ever happens, or if it does happen, it only happens for like tier 1 players. But I do think every move should come with some sort of plan for the player to get regular game time, right? And I think players should be more mindful of players who haven't had that and it's backfired for them. Like, is Zach Steffen in any better a position now for having gone to Europe in his career?
It's a great example, Graham.
Nope.
Yeah, he's not.
Is Caden Clark in a better position now than for going
Certainly
to
not.
RB Leipzig? Precisely. We all know the team he's playing for right now. I mean, Gio Reyna, you could argue, is in a better position, right? He has at least had that exposure, but I think players need to be mindful of that. If you are Diego Luna and you have an offer from Benfica and they are offering you, 1,500 league minutes in your first season, but then you have another offer from Nottingham Forest and they're in the Premier League and the allure of being in the biggest league in the world and the best league in the world, and maybe they'll be in the Champions League next season. But you're behind Morgan Gibbs-White. You've been Gio Reyna. So they might be offering more money for us. So it's really about what you want out of your career. And look, I can understand why players would take the paycheck at certain points of their career. That is very tantalising. I think you don't really know how you'll react to that situation until the offer is down on the table in front of you. But at the same time, you're maybe front-loading your career by taking the paycheck in your early 20s rather than building your career up to a point where you get that paycheck later in your career and you have a more rounded career, you're a more rounded player, you've had more experience in Europe. So I look at James Sands. James Sands is maybe a good example of this. He goes to Rangers, a huge club in European competition. I think they were maybe Scottish champions at the time, so I can understand why that was appealing for him. I never saw a route for him to be a first-team player at Rangers at that time. So I never felt good about that move. He then goes to St. Pauli earlier this year, better league but a smaller club, and he's unfortunately gets that injury, of course, but it seems like he's a big part of their plans. It seemed like he was going to play 15 games plus in the Bundesliga this season. So, yeah, there's no doubt for me that the second scenario would help a player become a better player and further their career.
Agree with everything that's been said. I would just add, sort of similar to the promotion relegation conversations we tend to have about American soccer and the idea that we tend to focus on the positives and the promotion aspect, and people maybe don't remember that there's relegation in there too. I think if players are approaching making a move abroad truly as this could go well, this could go poorly, and if it goes poorly, I then have to respond and find a way to succeed. I think sometimes players assume I'm going to Europe, and then from then on it's smooth sailing, and I'm just gonna kind of make a go of it. And I'm gonna keep moving up, and eventually I'll win the Champions League. I genuinely think a lot of players go assuming now they've made the jump, it gets easier to make the next jump, and I'm not sure that's always the case. Because to your point, Graham, even somebody like Zach Steffen, I would say when he gets loaned to Dusseldorf, there is a moment there where it's like, okay, he's going to make this move permanent, or another Bundesliga club is going to sign him because he's doing really, really well. That's when Lutz is still there, and maybe he ends up in St. Louis. Who knows? But he was doing well with Dusseldorf, playing really well, felt like he was going to kind of cement himself there, and then he gets injured. They don't make that permanent. He goes back to City, and now it's kind of all very confusing and chaotic. And that can happen more often than make the move, make the next move, and now you're in the Champions League. And I think players sometimes aren't as prepared for when things go south. How do you humble yourself and get back on your horse? That is the other thing I think you have to consider. Make that move if you want to, but recognize that making the move is not the end of the journey. Sometimes it's not even the start of the journey.
Precisely. It's not that I don't want players to have that dream, right? It's good for players to have that dream to want to play in Champions League finals and whatever. But when making that move, the agent should be asking those players, okay, how's that going to happen? What's the pathway to making that happen? And if there isn't an answer to that, if it's just I'm going to move to Europe and make it happen, then yeah, I'd maybe advise against it.
I think we need Ryan to be hired as a consultant just to be like, you're going to have to live in Middlesbrough, right? Like, I just want you to understand what that's going to signify and then see how they respond.
Yeah, I could be geographic coordinator. I'd be very happy to take that role for all US soccer players. Very glad indeed. AJ, thank you very much.
Charlotte and London with thumbs up.
Yeah,
everything else thumbs down.
It's just a map with a line at Watford. Is what it is.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're in the south of any country, you're good. That's what my general principle would be. AJ, thank you again for your question. One final question. Joe's not buying it. One final question. And it's
I think a sizable chunk of America might disagree with you. But anyway,
okay.
Go ahead. Yes.
All right. Personal opinion there has applied. One final question. It's the big one, and it's from our friend Texas Husia, who says, which animal in the United Kingdom wins a game of five-a-side?
In the United Kingdom?
Did I say United Kingdom?
You did.
Yeah.
I'm going to run that again. Which animal in the animal kingdom wins a game of five-a-side in the United Kingdom? My vote would be for the elephant, says
Great
Texas.
pick. Great
Husia.
pick.
Yeah?
I mean, is
is
it?
it the best pick, Joe?
It's popping the ball immediately, no?
Yeah, how does it?
Okay.
The ball doesn't stand a
No,
chance.
all right, let's play this out. Let's play this out for a second. I'm not sure this is
ball's
the
been
best
popped.
answer. I think it's a really good answer. The elephant. How are you scoring? You're not scoring. You're literally never scoring on an African
there
bush
speaks
elephant.
someone who hasn't watched the soccer match from Bedknobs and Broomsticks, where the crocodile gets out a little mouse,
Not a chance.
and scares the elephant. So
No, you get discarded. You get disqualified for that. Yeah, I mean, you're never scoring. The other team's going to give up eventually. This is like a almost a no-brainer. Monkey is tempting. Greyhounds are tempting if I want to go for pace merchants. Elephant is just so hard to beat. You're ultimately going to grind down the opposition.
how are you scoring a goal, Joe?
They're going to give up, dude. Like it's going to be the 57th round of penalties, and they're going to go home, and we're not because we're that dedicated.
I'm gonna disagree because I feel like an elephant is inherently meggable. Like it's going to be
Sit
kind of
down,
slow moving. It's a
And slow.
pretty big gap. I feel like you can pass right between.
Elephants
those
can
legs.
sit down, right? This is a legitimate question.
Yes, they can.
Elephants
All right, then
can
we're
sit
good.
down, Joe.
They
Problem
understand
solved.
their whole lives, Joe.
So the one thing we have to do, to win this game, is to sit down in front of the goal. I think that's doable.
Well, I mean, by this logic, a blue whale is the way to go. Just lay
Yeah, but
that
you
thing
can't play
down.
this
No
on
one's
water,
getting by
Tom.
it.
The sport's played on land. Sport's
Well,
played on
I
land.
did have an in the sea option, which was dolphins. Obviously,
Octopus.
my answer was bears. They're smart. They're smart. They're smart,
Wicked smart.
agile, and a famous Yosemite park ranger quote. There's like a significant amount of crossover between the smartest bears and our dumbest tourists. So I feel like bears could kind of handle a tactical plan. They're also fast. They're also strong. It's basically a team of Nicholas Sulas running at you full speed, but with more mauling capability as well. And then my daughter
so
nominated unicorns, which are real in this household. She pointed out that you could stab the ball with the horn and then run it into the goal, but you could also kick it. And then you could also fly through the air as well. They're really covering you in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, we are, by the way, ruling out handball or poor ball in this instance,
Poor
right?
ball.
Well, now this
could
goes
use
to
all
the
four.
age-old philosophical question of, does a four-legged animal have four legs, or are
Right.
the front two hands?
All right. Yeah, I think-
Legs.
Yeah, legs for sure. So I think you're
If
clear.
a dog wore pants, would it be on all four legs or just on the back too?
Quadruped is all I'm saying. It's right there in the Latin.
Wow.
Oh,
Graham, what's your answer?
I went for cheetah. I've gone for anything with pace. Plus, it's basically it's a cat, right? And cats have wicked good reflexes when you throw a ball.
Basically
at them,
a cat, right?
Yeah,
Basically.
not that I have ever thrown a ball at a cat before, but I've seen videos of cats being
Good cover, Graham.
goalkeepers. So
I smell a Patreon video. Graham goes to the zoo
Show the
and is
footage,
immediately
Graham.
escorted out of the zoo.
yeah. You can't do that here.
Wow, I like that.
Yeah,
That was fun.
Elephant still. Ryan, do you have something that's going to beat an elephant? Because I'm just still not convinced.
I think so. I'd like to put on the table as a friend of the ocean and a patron of the aquaria of this fine nation and all nations, the walrus. I don't know if you've ever seen a walrus or a grown walrus up front. They are massive, so I think they are getting good coverage in front of the net. They also are quite quick. They can be quite quick. So I think they could move around the field pretty well, and they could use their fins to, smack the ball around, provided we're not having fin ball or handball in this scenario. And they look terrifying as well, facially, at least. So, the Walrus, a team of walruses, are winning five-a-side for me.
Apparently, walruses can swim at 22 miles per hour. That's pretty impressive.
I believe we've established this game is on land.
No, yeah, I was just pointing that out as a fact.
Can the floor
Ryan's
be
answer's
slightly
obviously
wet
wrong.
so my walrus can sniff around easily?
Yeah, because I don't think they're really fleet of foot on land.
Well, someone
walruses.
slides it down the pitch.
Yeah.
You got to run
Can
this
it be
like
a
for
bowling
at
ball?
least an hour pre-match.
Can I stand in the field with a bucket full of fish that I occasionally throw to them as well to encourage them?
Oh wow,
Graham, do you all have zoos in Scotland? And if so, are the animals even sadder than they are in a normal zoo?
I have never been to a zoo in my life. I think that there's one in Edinburgh, which...
Where they all read
but,
books?
There's a safari park near where I grew up to, and we used to float down the river to the lion enclosure on a dinghy. Entirely true story, but I've never been to a zoo in my life.
Is the river Ironbrew?
Yes, our rivers are of iron brew. That's correct. How fast can a walrus swim in that?
22 miles per hour. I think.
Yeah,
I
extra
think,
couple
I mean,
of, some more horsepower.
The
from that
bubbles
Ironbrew.
carry along. A bit
That's
faster.
right.
All right, I think I'm not sure we've landed on consensus here, but we've all had very
Black bear
good
is the
options.
correct answer, but you all refuse to acknowledge it, so that's
How
fine.
fast is a black bear?
I bet they're quick.
As fast climbing as it is running, according to Dwight Schrute, or the opposite. But they're fast.
30 miles per hour is what the internet tells me.
What? 30
Wow.
A black bear can go 30
man.
miles an hour.
That's why you
Gareth
don't run
Bale speed.
or run faster than the person you're with. That's the rule of running from bears.
That's true.
And, and you know how fast elephants can run? Exactly that fast. Boom. Mic drop.
if falling downhill, maybe. I'm not sure about that one, Joe.
Yeah, they tumble.
They can't sit down. So.
I also, although Taylor, I like the black bear, I do worry, similarly to the elephant, the ball popping with its bear claws.
I mean, that is what happens in Bed Knobs and Broomsticks. They blow the popped ball over the line to score the winner. Because the rhinos popped it.
Walruses have tusks,
Yeah, you have to
right?
say your tusks are causing a problem, I'm pretty sure.
If so, I don't want to hear it from you, Mr. Bailey.
What I'm hearing is cheetah
point.
was the correct answer.
Yeah, they don't have claws. I did watch, not gonna lie, 3 different videos of kangaroos involved in soccer
Tempting.
games. Really
Tempting.
hoping, but they have to move both legs at the same time, and that really limits the ability to
Yeah.
kick a ball effectively.
Actually, that might be the answer. They're hench, man. You ever seen a kangaroo like?
yeah, dude.
Kangaroos are Zlatan. We agree with that, right?
Yeah. There's one video, I think in Australia, definitely in Australia, of a kangaroo invading a pitch. And Joe, to your elephant point, it seems to just take up a position in the goal, laying down in a very resplendent, recumbent manner. But it does feel like it belongs as a I'm going to block this small-sided goal sort of player. So I have a
Elite
kangaroo
strategy.
goalkeeper.
Elite level strategy.
I like it.
Okay. All right. Well, some very viable options here, listener. We haven't reached a consensus. Why don't we do so on our Discord? You can join at patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. Have a conversation in there about the very serious topic of which animal in the animal kingdom wins a game of five-a-side and much more. Join us there. But for now, Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed for answering listener questions with
My
your
pleasure.
consultant as well.
My pleasure. Unicorn was the answer for sure.
Jerry Lowry, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Graham Ruthven, pleasure as always, my good man.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey. If it was animals from the United Kingdom, unicorn might have been the answer because famously national animal of Scotland. So,
I have one on my
there you go.
passport, Graham. I have one on my passport. There we
There
go.
we go.
Yeah. Maybe it's 5 Roombas. Thank you very much, my Roomba, for the for the interruption of this podcast as well. Listener, we'll be back on the feed very shortly, but for now, bye.